Hey everyone, welcome back to Citywide Blackout, your home for music, movies, and more. I'm your host, Max Bowen. In this episode, I'm chatting with EDM artist Sara-Kaden. He takes us through his career, which has seen the release of 3 albums, 2 EPs, and over 6 singles, all using his iPhone and a MacBook. He talks about the production process and some of the programs he uses, as well as how music has helped him deal with issues like anxiety and depression. Welcome back, everyone, to Citywide Blackout, your home for music, movies, and more. I'm your host, Max Bowen, and joining me now is EDM artist and podcast host, Sara-Kaden. Welcome to the show, man. Great to have you here.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me on the show.
There is so much I want to just dive into because I've been reading about you and all your work. There's so many different facets here that I want to just touch on. I want to start first with your music. It's an EDM style of music. You've been doing this for a couple years now. But I understand that you kind of got into it from hearing SARiKAiDen. That was kind of the thing that kind of got the ball rolling for you.
Yeah. So back in 2012, I was, on YouTube looking through videos and stuff. I mean, I was a 12-year-old kid, so most likely looking at Minecraft videos and stuff. I don't know, but I came across "Breaking a Sweat" by Skrillex and the Doors, and I don't know, something about it just clicked in me, and I just fell in love with it. And then I started looking into Knife Party and Excision, and my fascination just grew from there.
Had you done music before this, or are you entirely self-taught as an artist?
I was in a choir for a year and a half. I had a vocal coach named Brian Stevenson, which is funny because I don't sing in my music, but
I was going to say, I don't recall there being lyrics there.
Yeah, but I do have that under my belt, and I did theater for 4 years.
Oh, so. Wow. Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. Now, does the theater thing come in handy at all with doing your music? Because I know that EDM shows can be very much theatrical. They can be performances in of themselves.
Yeah. So I'm someone who kind of likes to, like you said, it's kind of like a performance, and I really like to have that aspect when I'm making my music. So a lot of my image and stuff is clown and circus based. So clown makeup and big tops and all that stuff. So
aside from Skrillex, are there other EDM artists that you kind of look up to?
For sure. Deadmau5 is a pretty big one.
Yeah.
There's an artist known as Rez. She's pretty big. Then there's other ones that are probably lesser known, but still pretty big influences to me. There's No Mana. There's one called OMFG. His real name is Alex Savage. He makes really good stuff. And I'm also influenced by artists that are not EDM at all, like My Chemical Romance, Panic at the Disco, and then bands like Metallica and AC/DC and stuff like that. So nice. I get my influence. Yeah, I get my influence from a lot of different places.
Dude, that is a great list. I love your list of music. It's very cool. How do you find new music? Do you let people recommend stuff to you?
Yeah, for sure. I always like to have a pretty open mind and an open ear to music. There isn't really anything I really don't like, as long as it sounds good and is produced and mixed well, I'll probably enjoy listening to it.
Now, I know that that you've released a lot so far. You've got 3 albums out, 2 EPs, 6 singles. It's quite an accomplishment, and that's over the course of a year or so. That's about when you've been since doing music.
Yeah, and I actually have a new 4-track EP dropping tomorrow. So
damn. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yep. So tell us about the new album. What can your fans expect from this?
So this one is more heavily focused on techno and simpler kind of minimal house beats and stuff. The opening track is a really energetic kind of clubby sounding track. Then there's an ambient piece that's kind of mellow and piano and all that stuff. And then there's a song called Carnival, which is sounds like big top music, hence why it's called Carnival. The name is literal. And then it ends with this kind of, big beat kind of banger. So, over the 4 tracks, I think it's very energetic. It's called Vortex of Whatever. So,
nice, dude, sick name, man. I dig
very
that.
Excited to get it out. Yeah.
Very cool, man. Speaking of names here, Sara-Kaden, where did that one come from? How'd you sort of come up with that name?
It's funny because I actually get asked that a lot from people. What does SARiKAiDEN mean? And to be quite honest, there is no meaning behind it. It's kind of just a random gibberish word that I came up with out of the top of my head, but it stuck, and that's really all there is to that.
Fair enough, man. Fair enough. Yeah, I think like most band names, most like artist names tend to be gibberish things, that they tend to be something that they come up with at like the last second, saying, "Okay, guys, we've got a show next week. We need a name for the band for the flyer. What do we got?" And then they say, "Okay, random word for the dictionary. Good enough for us."
Yeah, it's funny because before I settled on that name, I was looking at, because there's an artist named Marshmello. I'm sure you've heard of him. There's an artist named Slushy, and I was thinking, oh, I could go down that route. I'm gonna call myself, I don't know, Muffins. But surely enough, that name was taken, and I was like, darn,
damn it!
Why?
Curse you, copyrighted names. Have you had the chance to actually play out and do shows?
Not yet, but it's always something I've really wanted to do. I have this. I have a lot of big ideas. Producers like Excision are kind of known for the big visual effects and stuff, and that's something I look up to and something that I would love. One of my biggest dreams and goals is to perform at Red Rocks, at the Red Rocks Amphitheater, so it's definitely a goal of mine for sure.
Excellent. Now, I know that you live in New England, and I'm not too familiar with like EDM in general. I have like a passing like listenership to it, but is there a scene around here for that, or would you have to go somewhere else to kind of find the audience?
I think there's an EDM scene. I think an EDM scene can be found pretty much anywhere. Last year I went to an EDM show. I saw 4 artists, and that was in Hartford. So,
Okay, cool.
I think you can find them anywhere. You just have to look hard enough.
New England seems to be, for the most part, we're kind of like, I think, like primarily like a folk, rock, and a largely metal scene. But there are like some genres that don't seem to get as much of attention, and there's different reasons for that. So I was just kind of curious.
Yeah, for sure.
Now, like EDM, electronic, techno, are those all the same thing, or are they very different genres?
They're all very closely tight-knit. So EDM as a whole is a genre. And then you have these different subgenres like techno, dubstep. There's one called Vomit Step from an artist named Snails, and you can probably tell by that name it's completely disgusting and vile sounding. There's disco and drum and beat. And dubstep itself is interesting because it's actually a mixture of dub and two-step garage. It formed in the 1990s in London, UK. So it has a lot of reggae influence in it. And there are a lot of songs that you can tell this when you listen to them. There's one called Make It Burn Them from Skrillex, which has vocals by Damian Marley, who is Bob Marley's son. So
wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Who do you say is the artist that you most want to perform with?
Who do I most want to perform with? Probably Rez. Yeah, I really enjoy the hypnotic, psychedelic sound of her music. So kind of mixing my experimental sound with that kind of hypnotic trancey stuff, I think would be really cool.
Well, Rez, if you're listening to this is your guy right here. Book him to a show. I also want to ask about the production for your music. So I read that you do this entirely on like your phone, your MacBook. How do you go about like making the songs? Do you use like certain like programs?
Yeah, so there's a really cool program on iOS on the iPhone. It might be on Android now, but to be honest, I don't know. I'm not sure about that. But it's called Medley, and I use that to concept my songs. I kind of make the melodies and the drum beats and stuff, and then I port the files over to my MacBook, and I use FL Studio, Ableton Live, Logic Pro. It really depends on what the song is and what it calls for. But yeah, I rely very heavily on my laptop and my phone.
Nice, man. Nice. So you can basically just like make music like wherever. If you happen to be like out walking around, something kind of strikes you, you can just like make a beat right there.
Yeah, and it's really cool because like I can be on, a subway or a plane or something, and an idea can just hit me sometimes out of the blue, and I can just take, my phone out of my pocket. And it's not even necessarily that I, like I said, make a whole song on my phone, but I'll open the tool and kind of jot the melodies down or make the rhythms and stuff, and then I'll turn it into a song once it's put on my Mac.
How long would you say it takes you to make a song?
That really depends. Usually the shortest time for me is usually about a week.
And is this the kind of thing like you do just kind of like off and on in between like school or work or whatnot?
Yeah, I do it whenever I have free time, alongside the other things I do,
Which is a
'cause
lot.
I have,
Yeah.
yeah, the podcast once a month. I have the book I'm in the works on, so.
Wow. Whoa. Hold on. The book? You're working on a book too?
Yeah,
I just
yeah,
threw that one out
this
there,
is
huh?
kind of, yeah, this is kind of some people know about this. Some people might be, like you hearing about this for the first time. So I'm sure, are you familiar with Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah. I started writing an anthology which is heavily influenced by that, called Somni. Somni is Latin, or it comes from the Latin word for sleep. Um, it's an anthology book, a set of short, scary stories, which are based heavily on nightmares and dreams from my childhood. And I'm expecting to get that out to editors in 2021. That's the goal. I've been working on this since November of 2018. So this is definitely not something that's like brand new. I've been working on this for a while, kind of behind the scenes. Then there's a fantasy, which is in the concepting phase, called They Live on an Island. And it's about a news reporter named Matthew who gets sent to investigate an island, only to discover that it's alive and evil and takes over the mind of the people who inhabit it. So that one's very heavily influenced by Stephen King. So yeah, good stuff.
Terrifying stuff, but horror is basically your bag. You are all about horror. In fact, that leads to the next topic. Your podcast, Mumble the Owl. It's a horror podcast, and I know that you actually recently relaunched it because I heard your first episode for the new year. You basically took everything, took it down, saying we're just starting brand new. What happened to lead up to that?
As I was doing the show, I started, I don't know, I started kind of thinking, well, maybe it would be cool if this was just a discussion show in general where we talk about horror movies and TV shows and books and music and all that stuff. And I also started incorporating a lot of editing gags and stuff into my episodes and stuff, because I have ADHD, and that shows very heavily when people watch, especially when they watch the videos on YouTube. My editing is very sporadic. And there's a YouTuber named 8-Bit Ryan who I take influence from when I do my editing. It's not a carbon copy, but the inspiration is definitely noticeable and it's definitely there.
Mm-hmm. What kind of horror movies do you like? I'm sure you get this question a bunch.
Oh yeah, I like a lot of stuff from Wes Craven and John Carpenter. My favorites are probably things from like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre series, or Friday the 13th, or just classics like that. Evil Dead, and Child's Play, and movies like that. I am a really, really big fan of Stephen King. I read a lot of the classics like It, Thinner, Christine, Misery. So.
Yeah, I definitely love Stephen King. I think I read The Stand when I was like 20, probably. I just was sucked into that book because I'm really also a big fan of any kind of like post-apocalyptic story. And The Stand, like almost the entire planet just drops dead, and the survivors have to kind of fight to survive. And I just love that one. I gotta say though, I'm not a fan of everything he writes. There's some things he does that I think is amazing. Yeah. Like Cell, I love. That was a great story. But I tried to read Salem's Lot. I think I got 100 pages in. I'm like, yeah, I'm not getting it.
Yeah, it's funny you say that because I liked the It movies, both the 1990 and the 2017 one. I haven't seen It Chapter 2, so I can't speak on that one. Mm-hmm. I had to fight to read through the book. I could not get into it. It got to the points where I was like, oh, okay, the clown's eating children. That's cool. And now it's 100 pages of complete bullshit that doesn't mean anything.
You're
like
just
he will spend 50 pages telling you how the pavement on a sidewalk works, or how the road looks on the street, and I'm like, I don't care. Give me the clown.
you're just like looking at the book going, and the man loves his description. He is very good at that. He is very good at just painting the scene.
I would definitely agree. Sometimes you hold one of his books and you look at the thickness of it and you go, what was this necessary? You probably could have trimmed this down by 500 pages and it would still be good.
Any other like horror authors that you're a fan of?
This lesser known author named Aaron Wise, he made a trilogy called 314, and it's a fantastic book series. The first book is actually available for free on Apple Books and I think on Kindle and stuff too. It's an amazing book. It's about a town that's terrorized by the ghost of a dead child. He died and turned into a demon named the Skeleton Man, and he kind of terrorizes the inhabitants of the town. So it's a really good trilogy. And then I'm also, I like, H.P. Lovecraft, stuff like that. So some of the stuff like by Edgar Allan Poe. I don't know if you would necessarily consider him horror, but he definitely has some elements of horror.
Yeah. I think just because it's not scary doesn't mean it's not horror. I think his stuff definitely is creepy in a very different way than, say, Stephen King is. Or have you read anything by Brian Keene?
No.
He's a great horror writer. He has basically created this whole immersive universe over the course of his books, where there's a lot of like common themes and actually common characters, kind of like did different appearances. So I highly recommend that. He's one of my favorite writers.
There's a really, really popular graphic novel series that's written by Stephen King's son Joe Hill called Lock and Key.
Yes.
And there's actually there's a Netflix series on it now, and that series is just fantastic with the artwork and the way the story is told and the kind of creepy horror elements. Although I'm pretty sure almost everybody will agree, the books are definitely scarier than the show is. They kind of dialed it down a lot in the show.
Oh, really? Stranger Things. Are you a fan?
For sure, yeah. I'm also a big fan of American Horror Story and Creep Show and The Twilight Zone, stuff like that.
Oh, wow. So you were just this like consumer of all things horror.
For sure, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Do you get scared easily, though? I mean, since you've seen all this stuff, does it just kind of like pass over you?
I guess it really depends on what it is. Some things I definitely think I kind of, brush over, and I'm like, But some things do kind of, send shivers down my spine and make me wonder if I should have even watched it to begin with. But yeah.
I don't watch a lot of horror only because I live alone. So when you do that, all of a sudden, all like the noises become like, oh God, what is that really?
Yeah. But, you hear the pipes creaking and you're thinking, oh no.
Yeah, exactly.
Something's in my walls.
Exactly, yeah. So like for like me and horror, I kind of watch like everything. Like I have watched like Stranger Things, of course, Walking Dead. I don't know if that qualifies as horror or not, and I watched like a bunch of like the movies on Netflix, especially a lot of the found footage movies. What's your take on just horror today? Is it still scary? Are they going in any kind of new directions, do you think?
For me, it really heavily depends on who the director is. I'm not the biggest fan of a lot of the newer movies using an overabundance of CGI. I guess if it's, done well, then it's okay. But, I mentioned Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark earlier, and that movie uses practical costume effects. The monsters are actually there on the set, and I appreciate when they do that. Movies like cult classics like The Stuff. There's a scene in the end where, it completely obliterates Charlie and his mouth is stretching open, and they actually used on-set puppets to make that happen. So I really appreciate when they use practical effects and the actors are actually looking at it rather than just staring at a blank space and being like, okay, pretend there's a monster there. Trust me, we'll put it in post editing. They're actually looking at it face to face. So I guess it really depends on how the movie's made and who the director is.
Okay. Favorite director?
I really think I'm going to have to go with Wes Craven.
As mentioned earlier, you kind of like started the podcast over. What can people look forward to in the new year? What do you have? Do you have anything planned, or you?
This show, because it's once a month on the first Friday of the month. Things kind of come up. After I release the episode, I kind of go for a period where I start researching things and looking into things and looking at things that would pique my interest or something that I might want to, kind of dip my toes into. But I'm thinking of doing something related to, probably American Horror Story or Supernatural or something like that, and talking about that show or those shows in my next episode, probably talking about how I got into, those shows and what led me to watching them and becoming fans of them. Because American Horror Story was interesting for me. I was introduced to that by a friend of mine in high school. We were in a music theory class together, and they recommended it to me. And at first I was like, I don't know. It didn't really pique my interest at first. Then I went on Netflix and I went, oh, you know what? This is actually pretty good. Oh, look at that. There's, there's more seasons. So I'll just keep watching it.
Well, something else I want to ask you, because I've never actually met someone who does this, but you are also, among the other 6 million things, you are also a furry. I read that. And you actually have 4 different what's called fursonas. You have Mumble the Owl, which again is the name of your podcast.
Yeah, which is where the podcast name comes from, yep.
You got Max the Owl, you got Ash the Fox, and Alex the Bear. So I know nothing about this, so I'm probably going to ask a lot of dumb questions, but I'm just really curious. How does one become a furry? How did you get into this?
It's interesting because there's a lot of, a lot of misrepresentation of the fandom, a lot of stuff, which I guess happens with every fandom. It's not furry exclusive. One of my friends showed me photos of a fursuiter named Telephone, and it's one of the most adorable costumes I've ever seen, and it was created by an artist who's known as Eno 98777, and they don't own the character anymore, but they created the character. And it kind of got me interested in it. My fursona, it's funny, I used to have one, and he was a coyote named Mordecai. And then I switched it to the owl. And then I kind of made the other 3 after that. But there is some character lore with my characters. Mumble and Max are brothers. Ash is supposed to be Mumble's best friend. And he's actually voiced by a good friend of mine, almost a good character. A good friend of mine named Toby. So he provides the voice for Ash, and then
In these personas, do you go to different events for this kind of thing? Do you make videos? What's the furry lifestyle about exactly? How do you kind of express it?
There are a lot of people who definitely do that and go to conventions and wear the fursuits and stuff and all that. I've never really been into that side of it personally. For me, it's always just kind of been the cartoon and art aspect of it. I've always kind of viewed my characters as cartoon characters and nothing more than that. They're just, cartoon characters. And Mumble has really sort of become my mascot now, being the name of my podcast. And he's, definitely can be seen outside of the furry fandom as, my mascot character. So.
Are your fursonas meant to be an aspect of your own personality?
Definitely. I think each one represents a certain side of me. Max is the very energetic. He's Mumble's little brother, so he's very, very energetic. He kind of represents the ADHD side of me. Mumble is kind of the reserved introvert side of me that's kind of laid back. Doesn't really communicating or talking with people, but he will. But he's kind of the person who goes to a party and just kind of stands in the back corner and doesn't really like being there. And then the other ones like Alex is brand new, so his story hasn't really been developed yet. But there are a few things about him. He's a dancer. That kind of represents the musical side of me. Ash is an interesting one because that's one that me and Toby are collectively working on. That's something that we kind of own, like a character that we own as a duo together. So, we kind of throw things into, a bucket and just kind of pull things out willy-nilly. And we're like, oh, it'd be really cool if we did this or we did that.
Now, do you have like different like fursuits for each character?
I actually don't own any fursuits.
Oh, okay. See, I was again an assumption here. I kind of assumed that being a furry, like you just have like the costumes.
No, they can be quite pricey. A lot of makers, if you want just a head, it'll be around $700, $800. So they are not cheap, especially if you have 4 characters. That's looking around probably. You picture like 1,000, 2,000 per suit. That's like 8,000 for all the costumes. So no, absolutely not.
Yeah, I cannot afford that.
No, and it's funny because I feel like there's always the kind of more nasty sides of every fandom, the parts of the fandom that you don't really want to associate with. That's kind of where a lot of the bad rep for this fandom comes from, because a lot of people look at it and they're like, oh, well, people just go into fursuits to have sex and stuff. And we're like, absolutely not. They are way too expensive. 98% of us would probably have a cardiac arrest if our suits get damaged. I know, like, I would be someone who, I would spill water on the front of it and probably have a heart attack because of how much they cost.
Yeah. It's like, it's $2,000 down the drain. Fantastic. In terms of like expressing their personas, do you do artwork?
Yeah, a lot of it has to do with commissioning artwork from different artists and just kind of stuff like that. Yeah.
I think like most people, like I hear furries and I just kind of think of, I kind of just bought into, I think, the negative stereotypes that people have, like, oh, it's some kind of freaky sex cult or something like that. I had no idea what it was about at all. So this has been pretty insightful.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people do, and I think it's really good to kind of know and to kind of learn, especially from someone who's in the fandom and kind of, deals with it from a day-to-day basis. We're just completely normal people, well, as normal as I can get. Most of us, I would probably say 98% of us are strictly into the more innocent, friendly side of it, the anthropomorphic animals and stuff like that. And the thing is, too, like, for us, anything involving anthro animals can be considered furry. So something like Zootopia from Disney or Robin Hood or, stuff like that. So a lot of us, there's a big majority of us who totally detest and are completely against the, I guess we call it the NSFW side of the fandom. I myself am pretty appalled by it. I don't like associating myself with it. So, and I know a lot of my friends are that way as well.
Why did you decide to make Mumble the mascot for your podcast?
It's interesting, seeing, because I have 4 different characters, I could have chosen any of them. I think it's just because Mumble is the one that I kind of associate with the most. On a personal level, I think he really represents my core character the most, and he's kind of like the animal, I guess you could say, version of myself. So I have 4. My sister has 4 kids. I have three nephews and a niece. And there's a show on Netflix that they're all like completely obsessed with called Super Monsters. I'm sure you probably are familiar with it. And in that show, the kids are human during the day and monster at night. The way I kind of think of Mumble is like, if furries were kind of like that, where they were, human during the day and they became animals at night, Mumble would be who I would turn into if I would become an animal. So that's the way I kind of look at it.
With everything you've got going on, you're writing the book, you're doing the podcast, of course, you're making your music. Do all these things get like equal treatment, or do you think one is one that's a little closer to your heart that you kind of focus on more?
The music definitely for me is the biggest thing. The writing I've always looked at as kind of like a, something I'm passionate about, but it's really a hobby at the end of the day. Alongside the podcasting, it's definitely something I have a lot of fun doing. And I definitely want to continue doing it as long as I can. But it's really a hobby. The music is like the pride and joy of my life and the thing that I'm passionate about and the thing that I want to do full time. I guess my answer to that is the music takes top priority for me.
Your music isn't just music for you. It's also has helped you cope with a lot, specifically things like anxiety and nervousness.
Yes.
I think it's great that music can help people like that. So could you explain a bit about how it's kind of helped you?
I grew up with, a lot of anxiety and stuff, and I had to go through a lot of heavy counseling. There was a point in my life where I just was so down and so depressed, and I actually became suicidal, and I'm happy I'm still here. It's one of those things where when it doesn't work, when you try to go through with it and it fails, or like it doesn't work and you're still alive, it really makes you appreciate being alive. I think just listening to music, because I listen to music a lot outside of performing or producing music. I just am constantly listening to music all the time, and it's definitely a big mental coping mechanism for me. It brings me a lot of joy. If there's anything that's going to make me want to keep living and keep going through my life, it's the music. I'm constantly looking forward to the future and what it could bring, but I'm definitely happy in the state that I'm in now. I definitely do still deal with depression and stuff. The thing is, those thoughts never truly go away, but I definitely don't act on it anymore. I think the music is something that I'm too heavily invested in the music to want to give it up. And I'm sure, artists like Avicii, which it's a tragedy what happened with him and that suicide and stuff. But I'm sure they probably said that too at some point, or Chester Bennington from, Linkin Park. I'm sure they probably said that too. But I think the music is what drives me to keep going.
Well, Sarah, I've been really glad to get to know more about you and all your work. And dude, just keep doing it. Keep doing the music. Keep doing your podcast. I want to hear more episodes. I want to hear more of this, and I want to see the book. It's going to give me nightmares, but I want to see the book.
I can't wait to get it out.
Oh man, dude, seriously, make this thing happen. But in the meantime, where can folks go if they want to learn more about you and to just check out your various things?
I post a lot of updates on Instagram. You can find me at Sara-Kaden Official. Spotify and Apple Music are my biggest platforms. Funny enough, 95% of all of my listens come from Apple Music. So I definitely have the biggest number of listeners on that platform. If it's a social media platform and you type in my name, you're probably going to find me.
Fair enough. And for the folks who do want to learn this is SARiKaiden. Look it up.
Yes.
Check the stuff out. Check out the Mumble the Owl podcast. New episodes coming very soon. And Sara-Kaden, thanks again, man.
Thanks for having me.
All right, folks, that will do it for this episode. Thanks again for listening, and big thanks to Sara-Kaden for joining me. You can catch this show on Podbean, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, TuneIn, and every Saturday at 10 p.m. on Boston Free Radio. Follow me on Facebook under Citywide Blackout, Twitter, Instagram, Citywide Max, and citywideblackout.blogspot.com. Keep those ears open.